episode is brought to you in part by Real-Time CTMS, a leading provider of innovative software solutions for clinical trial research sites, site networks, sponsors, and CROs. To get a free demo, visit the company's website at realtime-ctms.com and complete one of their contact forms. Hello and welcome to the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. Welcome to episode 51. This week, we speak with Bree Burks. Bree is an ICU nurse turned clinical researcher turned technology enthusiast. She's currently the Vice President of Strategy for Site Solutions at Veeva Systems. In this episode, we discuss the lack of practical training for clinical research sites, the frustrating universe of point solutions in clintech, the growing need for standardization in site operations, and so much more. Without further ado, Bree Burks. All right, Bree, how are you doing? Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Where are you at? Where are you located?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Nice. You guys, is it hot there yet?
It's starting to get hot. I feel like the weather right now, this time of year, is kind of inconsistent, so it's a little surprising. But we finally made it out to the pool, and so for me, that's like when summer really begins.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we've had the same. We've had the same here. It's got super hot, and then it got cold,
Yes.
and
Yep.
just now getting back into the heat again. So, gotta love the weather in that part of the country.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, fair enough. I'm going to start out, like I always do. I always find it really interesting to kind of hear people's clinical research origin stories, if you will. So, if you would, tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry and kind of bring us up to where you are today.
Sure. Well, like some in our industry, I started out clinical. I'm a nurse by background. I started out in a neuro ICU and just really fell in love with neuro patients. They were complicated and I just had a heart for that type of patient population. So I thought, I want to be a nurse practitioner and stay in the ICU and continue to work with all of these neuro patients. And I started seeing a lot of these nurses that I had worked with get these research jobs. And that meant for them that they were walking around with white coats on, with a clipboard, drawing a lot of blood. And so when I went in to get my master's for nursing, I thought that looks a lot easier. Like I could probably do that job, moonlight a little bit, go to school, be easier than being in the ICU, and took a research job with pretty much no expectations and really got fascinated with the work. I just had a really cool opportunity to be part of the first ever positive studies for this procedure now that's pretty standard of care for really bad strokes. And I just got a cool opportunity to be, part of saving lives and a lot of early phase studies. And it fascinated me. And I thought, man, I could have a much bigger impact than just taking care of my 2 patients at a time or 1 patient at a time doing this type of work. So I pivoted and got an opportunity to work across. I started at the University of Florida, worked at the University of Colorado, Denver, worked at Vanderbilt, and really just went from running all aspects of the trial to managing small teams, to managing large teams, to then thinking about the operations of large teams, how to be more efficient, how to build technology, how to run a lot of large investigator-initiated studies, and found it to be pretty frustrating and really thought, man, we could just be so much more efficient. I got pretty fixated towards the end of my stint at Vanderbilt with technology and really saw it as a solution to so many problems and felt like we didn't have a lot of great options at that time available. So found my way from running a large office at Vanderbilt into working at a technology company, which is what I do now. And I focus on research site applications at Veeva.
Nice. Yeah. So a couple of things I'm going to pick out of it. First of all, I started in neuro too, which I find I don't know. I think it helped for me to start neuro because it's just so fascinating in and of itself. You start getting into neuroscience. I mean, the brain is still so much unknown and undiscovered, I guess, in a way about it. So I think that's just interesting. But how did you feel about your transition from sort of an ICU nurse to research? Was that challenging in any way? I find it kind of interesting because I feel like I see both sides, right? Like
Sure.
some transition so easily because, as you alluded to, without making it sound wrong, in some ways it's easier work, quote unquote, right? I guess you're not on your feet on the floor all day or anything like that. But I also find the other side of that coin is some nurses tend to be almost bored by it. They get less opportunity for patient care. I mean, how did you feel or deal with that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I knew I was going to like research, especially at that point in time when I started like getting fixated on binders and my tab colors. And, it really spoke to like the OCD part of my brain, which a lot of ICU nurses are kind of OCD too. But, I found myself my first day, I had a couple of books on my desk from my manager, kind of talking about terrible things that happened during the Holocaust. And that was basically my introduction. I got no other real support besides printed out protocols.
Sure.
And here's a couple of books for background and theory, and get in there and do your city training and get ready to go. So the transition was hard for me because I felt like I just didn't have, I think there's better resources today for people that are getting started. Still not great.
Yeah, that's interesting point is that something I've thought about lately. I mean, ethics gets such a GCP and ethics get such a hardcore focus when it comes to training, which of course is important. No one questions that. But I mean, not unlike you, especially I started out at an academic institution, but that was kind of it, right? Here's all these horrible things that happened. Here's how to, not let those things happen again. Of course, important in many ways, but not so much practical.
Yeah, and how do I actually do my job?
Exactly. Yeah, I think we still struggle with that, but I think it is getting better. But I think that's still just an issue. Sorry to interrupt you, but I find
no, you're not interrupting. That's so true.
I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's so true. And that was a difficult transition for me because, to your point, I thought I was going to just be like collecting a lot of information and really had no idea how difficult it was going to be. One of the other things that was on my desk when I started was a pager, and I was on call 24/7 enrolling patients with strokes for about 3 years of my career. And there was nobody to help be a backup call person for me. And that was never discussed, when I was interviewing before I took the job. So yeah, there were parts of it where, it was task oriented, but there were also, to your point, a lot of other challenges where now I was seeing the patient holistically, even more holistically as I did in the ICU, because you're seeing them. I'm seeing them come in. I'm seeing them in the operating room, getting the procedure. I'm seeing them for months to years and follow up. And that was a really cool, eye-opening experience for me, seeing these patients with terrible strokes actually do much better than I thought they would do, because my experience with them before was so limited in the ICU, such a short stint. So I loved being able to look at the patient more holistically and be a part of their broader healthcare journey. I was not anticipating that as part of the job, but I loved that coming in and doing research.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I guess I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, you do. I know you get to follow, you learn so much about these people, develop a relationship in different ways. And you do. It is very rewarding in a lot of ways to be able to sort of see them throughout that whole journey that they go on throughout the course of a trial. So no, that's interesting. Maybe just a different way to look at it. But I think it also kind of brings up what I love so much about clinical research is that there's so much breadth to it, right? Like you said, it's not just a short patient care encounter. There's all this stuff that, administrative tasks and then, clinical care and all the different aspects that go in, which kind of brings me more to the tech side and kind of where we're at or where you're at today. Tell us a little bit more. And I have some limited experience with Veeva, but, what do you guys do?
Veeva does a lot of different things. So maybe I'll just start just quickly sharing kind of as a company what we do and then talk about what I do there. Veeva was established in around 2007 by somebody that was at the very beginning of our current CEO and founder now, Peter Gassner. He was one of the initial Salesforce people. He's a product person, and he took his understanding of a CRM and really applied it into life sciences and created Veeva as a CRM and sort of started on the commercial side, not necessarily the research or R&D side of life sciences, and really did a good job of listening to a lot of his customers and we have over 40 applications now across Veeva that do all kinds of different things. And several years back, there was a realization of, now we are supporting pharma and even med tech and biotech companies, and we're running a lot of their operations, even running a lot of their data management. But where a lot of this is falling down is where they really wanted help was with their research sites and then with patients, the patient journey. So there was a lot of push from our current customers to help them think about that differently. And what we've always done at Veeva is build everything in-house connected on our platform. We haven't been a company that's done a lot of acquisitions and sort of offered a large disconnected suite of different things. We've always thought about how all of this information flows, trying to make it more seamless. So the idea was, let's create patient technology and research site technology, the whole preface being it's connected to the back-end operations that the sponsors are running on our technology. So I got pulled in shortly after that decision was made, and we had some early adopter customers, and our initial focus was on the e-regulatory side of research sites. We have a lot of sponsors on our regulatory application for sponsors, and it was a great opportunity to think about connections. So we've started there and just sort of expanded over time. But now we are thinking about the front end of the work, we like to say, the direct to patient stuff, sites at the center of all of this, and how to start supporting more of their operations and do it in a way where that is creating a seamless exchange of information to sponsors on our technology. So I think about the site side of that equation.
Sure. Well, again, I've talked these kinds of things into the ground, but as a site, it's frustrating to deal with a bunch of, I guess, point solutions. You've got 6, 7 different systems that are disconnected, or it's not always even clear how they fit together. If they do, the site's kind of not aware of that. And to even now, so much is very top down in the industry. So sites are kind of told, like, here's your systems, good luck. And you don't really have a choice in the matter. Where we're seeing some, ability for sites to call some shots are things like eReg and things like eSource, even maybe not quite as heavy on the eSource, and CTMS. So things that are sort of CTMS kind of lives within itself at the site, but eReg is obviously something that is shared, or the idea is that it's kicked out to the sponsor so that you've got an exchange that can go on. I know that's what is your guys' solution? Site Vault? Is that what it's called?
That's
correct.
Right.
And you guys do that free to sites. Is that also correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So that's really interesting to me. Again, I think it's because look, we've got to get rid of all these binders. We just do. It's terrible. I cannot tell you how much I hate binders. So anything we can do to get rid of them, the better. And again, providing something that sites can drive. This doesn't have to be handed down from a sponsor, right?
Absolutely.
Sites can say, we use this eReg solution. And, are you seeing sites start to be more sort of vocal and upfront in that exchange with sponsors?
I am, but I also feel like I see a lot of variation. So when I was at a large academic medical center, we knew if we had a sponsor coming to us and it was a rare disease study, and we knew we had the patients and we could sort of hold them hostage and say, hey, you want to do this? You got to access our systems. We're not going to go into all of your portals. And we really knew we had more leverage that way. So I think the challenge is, and this is not fair. It's just not equal across the board for sites. What is the leverage that you have to hold over the sponsor? Do you have a relationship with them? Do they trust you? Do you have a lot of patients you can provide? And it's really an unfair approach that I think sites have to take to determine if they really can use their own systems or not. That became a massive frustration for me prior to coming to Veeva. We had spent years developing our own internal systems. Was hiring, and we had our own developers and product people, and we were working really, diligently to optimize our own business across our own technology and get rid of all the binders. But it really fell down, and you kind of think about to what end if you're still having to then duplicate, triplicate that information and other systems that you don't own. Just like you're saying, your hands are tied. Well, you want to work on the study, you know it's good for patients, you need the study for whatever reason, and you're just going to have to do it. And so I felt myself get to a point of just frustration, like we hit a wall. All this time spent, all this money spent picking out all these point solutions, building our own stuff internally, connecting it all together, realizing not having a technology background myself, specifically the cost and resources required to daisy chain all those systems together that we owned. And then just thinking that we would hit a wall with a lot of our studies from the sponsor perspective. So I hear you loud and clear because I lived that. And that is really why I decided to come to Veeva.
Yeah. And I think you point out something that isn't always maybe obvious to people, as I sometimes have these conversations online and people are like, well, just tell the sponsor you're going to do this. And I'm like, well, I'm just a guy with like a small site network, right? I don't have, I'm not the Mayo Clinic. I'm not MD Anderson. I don't have that leverage to tell study sponsors, like, you're going to do it. You're going to do it my way, because they're going to be like, that's cool. We'll just go to the guy down the street who will do it however we want them to do it, which, is an interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess. And now we're seeing more private equity backed site networks, which they'll also be able to sort of throw around their weight a little bit more. And I think that creates an issue because I think we do lack more community-based sites. I think that's what we want to see. And those aren't always going to be the most well-funded, or I guess sites that can necessarily leverage what they get to choose and do.
Right.
So I've even find myself in the same predicament where like, I just kind of have to throw my hands up and like, cool, whatever you guys tell us to use, we're going to use it. Yeah, it's going to be a terrible experience, but what other choice do we have? I mean, we don't know another study is going to walk in the door. This study's good for patients. It's good for everyone. So,
right.
We're going to do it.
Yeah. The site always takes on the burden of that.
And I also think because of that, sites, even I consider myself very like technology sort of progressive. I do think we need to be utilizing this stuff more, but I find there's very little incentive for me as a site to invest in it because, again, the sponsor is still going to have the ability to be like, no, cool. We know we have our stuff and you're going to use it. So, to what degree do we, or I guess, even in your own opinion, to what degree do you think sites will be able to sort of bring their own technology solutions to the table as time goes forward? We're seeing this big DCT movement. Does that, is that just going to be more of the same, except with more players in the game? Or are we going to see a shift towards, maybe some more site centric, quote unquote, a movement? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're going to keep seeing sites bring their own technology to the table. However, I think that we're going to see consolidation of all of these different point solutions in the market. So I think that right now we've got a lot of overlapping solutions. We've got a lot of competition in the site world providing a lot of the same types of solutions. And being a nurse and just being within healthcare, I like to think about the EHR as an example and what we saw there in the early days of electronic health systems. Now, when you look at that market, you see that there are these larger platforms out there that have more than 80% of electronic health record customers in the US are on a large platform. We can probably name them. There's 2, maybe 3. And then you see these other EHR providers that really are specialized. They just focus on oncology. They focus on very unique radiology, pharmacy needs, and you see a lot more specialization. So I think we're going to see a big shift in the solutions that sites have today. I think there's been a great amount of pressure, for good reason, put on vendors like Veeva to provide end-to-end solutions for sites, to talk through. We're seeing that now more and more in RFPs we're getting from sites. How do you connect us to sponsors? How do you connect us to patients? How do you enable us for DCTs? So it's good pressure to have as sites demand more. And also, I think as sponsors are thinking about the site experience more and more. That's been actually a great, pleasant surprise for me coming to Veeva, talking to more people, impactful positions at sponsors, CROs, and they really are thinking about the site experience. That doesn't mean that they're solving it yet. That doesn't mean that they think it's great, but it is on the forefront and they're really trying to be thoughtful. So I do think we're going to see a change, and I think sites are going to bring more of their solutions to the table, but there probably aren't going to be as many vendors. And I think all of those vendors are going to have to think about ways to connect site information back to sponsors more easily.
Yeah, so I think that kind of maybe brings about another question: is there an inherent advantage of end-to-end platform versus maybe API integration? So and I even sort of go both ways on this. On the one hand, I think that competition is not a bad thing,
Sure.
But of course, the downside of that is you've got 10 systems that do the same thing, which is also problematic. But is there a world where some of these systems continue to coexist? Maybe we don't see as much consolidation, but everybody at least agrees to play nice in the sandbox and develop APIs. And again, is there an advantage or disadvantage to that potential approach?
I mean, that's a very important question, and I think you would have technology companies and people within technology companies answer that question differently. But I'm on the podcast, so you're going to get my answer. I would say I think we're going to see API usage increase, right? I think we're going to see standards being created for our industry, but I don't think that that's going to be the main way over time that sites exchange information with sponsors and CROs. I'll tell you that because if you think outside of sites or even healthcare, life sciences, when you think about a great technology experience, you don't usually think about all of these different players living well together. Like, what other industry has all of these, 10, to your example, competing companies working together through API? Like, I know when I preparing for this, I got on Google and there is a connection there to Zoom where I can, quickly get on my Google Calendar and start a Zoom call. And there are connections like that across competitors. But you don't just see competitors coming together and kumbayaing and doing that. But I'd also say it's not just on the competitor side. It's a bad consumer experience. When you think about disruptive technology, like my example would be, I've given this before, when you do an Uber ride, for example, if you were using one app and the driver's using another app, and then to pay them, you're having to use another app. That's the problem, is that when you start working across different technology companies, they're not making decisions about their product and your experience across the products together. They're making decisions in a box for their company and to meet their needs. So to really think we're going to have this super slick site experience across how complicated the site business is, and all of these different companies are going to come together and the experience is going to be seamless, I just don't know that that's realistic from my perspective.
No, that's a fair point. And I guess, embarrassingly, I guess I haven't really thought about it that way because, to your point, you've got Android and Apple, right? You don't have 25 different, operating systems for phones, and they all play nicely together. Like your EHR example, you've got Epics and Cerners, and then a bunch of smaller players in the game, or whatever the case may be. And yeah, again, there'll probably continue to be some more small and specialized services or solutions, but
Absolutely.
Ultimately, okay, that's actually a interesting idea. And I guess there's no reason that my complaint is a lot of times that clinical research doesn't seem to fall in line with the way a lot of other consumer industries do. So there's no reason why it shouldn't. So that's actually a fair point.
I agree. I think it will over time. And I think I think COVID has put the right amount of pressure to try to make that happen. to think more about equity inclusion, the patient experience, the site experience, and not just think about it from the top down, like we started our conversation at the beginning. So I think the pressure is there. And I'll tell you from a technology company experience, we're feeling it, and we're thinking about how we deliver on a more seamless end-to-end from the front, where all of this information is collected from the front office, from the patients and the sites, all the way to the back office where the sponsors operate. On a lot of them across our technology today, we're really thinking about the industry much more holistically now. And I think the experience across all of the different consumers now using all of these different technologies. So I think we are going to see a big change in the way that technology connects us and consolidation across companies over the next coming years.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I would tend to agree. I think it's frustrating sometimes at the site level because
Sure.
we're sort of hearing it, but we're not quite seeing the results yet. But I mean, to your point, and in fairness, I have people reach out. I mean, if I complain about a system online, people are reaching out from the company and saying like, look, we earnestly want to try to make it better. What can we do to make it, a better experience at the site level? Now, it's not going to happen overnight, or nothing happens quickly in clinical trials. But again, I'm with you. I think that cautiously optimistic that we're slowly moving in that direction.
Yeah, being a part of a company now that has to think about what all of these different stakeholders are doing and how technology is going to connect all of these processes, it's hard. When you think about sites operating on paper, not only is that for comfort, but also they don't necessarily have to all follow standardized processes there. And I think that, something our CEO has sort of challenged all of us on is not necessarily thinking about lifting and shifting the way sites operate today into our technology, but really thinking about the way the industry should operate and how things should optimize. So I think in parallel with this, Brad, like getting to a better consumer experience for sites, we also have to think about standardizing site operations. And I know, that's going to look different across different types of sites and different types of patients, but I hear in my job every day the preference for how to name a document or, how to store it, what type of folder, and, problems, just to use that as a simple example. The fact that we haven't come together on the site side of this industry and tried to make those standards so then technology companies can do mapped seamless exchange across our regulatory documents into the sponsor operating systems. I think we also have to have this right transformational mindset in place from the site perspective to allow our technology companies to make a lot of this successful. We've got to let go of some of our preferences, and we have to think about the way that we share information, not just the way that we have always done it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, something I've overlooked at times. So, I mean, first of all, this is all incredibly complex and very new and very nuanced.
Yes.
And again, I find when I have these conversations, especially, on something like LinkedIn, it's just very hard to even account for all the different stakeholders all at the same time, because it's very challenging. But
right.
I find that an interesting point, and maybe something I've been against at times even, but sort of the idea of standardizing how sites operate, because I mean, look, it's, I worked in universities where like every department operates differently, and that's wild. And I thought at the time that was just completely and utterly insane. But the more you look around, the more that's maybe the norm within.
It is the norm from my perspective.
Yeah. Even all departments under the same roof are doing things completely differently from each other. And that does create a big problem. I mean, not only internally, but I think amongst the site community, and then obviously in the way, like you said, how technology can be implemented, because it can't account for an infinite number of ways for things to be done.
Right.
So that's actually a really interesting point. And I don't think, I mean, for me, I wouldn't be against, like you said. I mean, sometimes we're gonna have to give up sometimes some of the things we insist on being our way if we want to make some progress and kind of all move down the field together.
Yeah. We talk about that quote sometimes from Henry Ford at Veeva when he says, if I would have asked people what they would have wanted, they would have told me faster horses. And I do think that is part of what is going to enable this better consumer experience for all of us, is us coming together and really thinking about how to work together. Not just the systems that we want to implement, not just the way that one department wants to do it. I was just looking at an RFP this past week from a big institution that said, how can we implement, your product in various ways for every department? And instead of answering, what they want us to answer is, yeah, of course we can help you do that. And the reality is our technology can support that. Our response is, we do not think that that's best practice, and we're not going to allow you to do that, right? Don't do it, because then you can't get insights, even for just that organization, which is quite complex, across your different areas, because, it's an apple here and it's an orange there. So how do you report on that? So I think part of this too is going to require us having the right mindset and really thinking about what our industry needs. And I think that it could potentially give us a lot of time back in our day-to-day, because I don't know if you've had the unfortunate experience of someone leaves and you log in and you get access to all of their stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a mess, but how would you have known otherwise? Because your business at your site there is strewn, your business information, your business insights is either in paper or potentially, I know you guys have systems there, but I bet people still sometimes fall back to paper. But a lot of it's going to be in systems that other people own that you don't even have access to, because you'd have to train to get the access. And that doesn't make sense. And you're not going to get paid to do that. And then you'd have to manually pull it out. And, what are your data entry times across all your EDCs? I don't even know that. That always scared me in a clinical trial agreement. Oh, we're going to commit to all these data entry turnaround times. How are we even going to track that? How am I even going to track that we're doing that? So we've got to start thinking, if we want to optimize site businesses, that the way that you do that, is really through some standardization. And there's this really smart saying that variation is the enemy of quality. And I think it is. If we really want to get time back to focus on our patients and to really be more proactive in our decision making, to actually look at insights across our site businesses, we're going to have to start standardizing some things.
So yeah, that brings about another interesting point, I think, though, in that, in dealing with CROs and sponsors, they are very apprehensive and hesitant to tell sites how to operate, in some ways. Now, obviously they're cool telling you what systems to use, but they almost act scared to try to dictate much of trial execution at a site level. So I guess first question is, do you think that the industry as a whole recognizes the value in standardization across sites? And secondly, who leads the charge when it comes to that? Because ultimately, certainly sites aren't going to want sponsors to be the ones to come up with it. At the same time, there has to be at least enough consensus that everybody's willing to play nice together.
It has to be sites leading the charge. Like, there's no question that this has to be good for sites first. If, in order to really get to where I hope the industry gets to, sites need to be able to operate across their own technology for all of the studies that they're running, so that they really have good business intelligence to do their work and to get it done. And then the ideal is that information controlled by a site can then be exchanged study by study with their sponsor CRO. The challenge is there's not been a technology company that's been able to capture the market of sponsors and CROs and sites, like really serve both customers as equal stakeholders. And then you throw patients in there too. What's the patient experience? So I think you have to have a company or multiple companies that really are setting up their goals and their vision around optimizing each customer specifically on their own purpose-built technology, where people are not having to, where one stakeholder is not having to compromise to meet the other stakeholder's needs. That's really hard. And that's not going to be something that's going to be done, to your point. Probably after this podcast, you're going to go log into 10 different systems that don't talk to each other, right? So how does this help you today? Probably not yet, right? But I think that is what it is going to take, is the right company with the right mindset that can get the market share and the resources. And I think until we can really find that in these platforms, API is what we have. But I will say, at least in my own experience, sites really struggle. If that's on the site side to maintain and set up those integrations and connections, they just don't have the resources to do it. They don't have the time. They don't have the money. So I'm not seeing that work. A lot of technology companies have the opportunity to support APIs. I just don't know that it's really right now working to help them in big ways, because it's just too resource intensive to set that up. So I think we're going to have to see companies that say, I want to support all stakeholders without making one compromise to meet the other one's needs.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and maybe again a sort of a reframing of the way I've seen it talked about. I can appreciate that, and I don't know. Again, I hate to go back to another same sort of analogy, but you sort of get an Apple versus Android. Apple's sort of this like walled garden setup. You don't have, it's the same experience. You don't, as to where Android provides a little more customization, perhaps you can have a little bit of a lot more variation within. That's it. I mean, look, we're neither of those situations right now with the clinical trial industry. It's still feels like the Wild West in a lot of ways, but no, that's a very interesting idea to I've always been sort of against the all-encompassing platform idea, but I think you're selling me on it a little bit. So.
Well, good. But just to touch on your Android Apple example again, I think there also has to be an understanding of, if you look at the technology landscape for sites right now, most of them have picked a sliver of the site market. They have something very easy to implement. It is, from a resource and a cost perspective, it's on the lower side of the site market. It's a lot more plug and play. And then you have these more complicated site networks where you're getting all these acquisitions, you're getting groups working across all of this different tech. You're working within a healthcare system, you have an EMR, you want to do integrations there. And so there's another flavor too of supporting these sites that do want to have some customization, that do need to. I've experienced that myself at Veeva as we've started to support all of these active connections across site technology and sponsor technology. We've got almost 1,000 sites right now that are connecting and sharing information directly out of their system with sponsors on our technology. And something that we learned is there still needs to be some opportunity for customization for some of these big sites, big site networks. They have resources for integrations. They want to support integrations. And so again, the complexity of the site market for technology companies is, how do you do it all? If you're really going to create this digital exchange across clinical trials, you've got to be able to support all of these different site types. Nobody's really doing that right now. But we are thinking about that at Veeva, and we do have a wide range of different types of sites, and we have technology that is out of the box, and then we have technology that you can customize. So many, like you said, it's hard, it's complicated, trying to figure out how to pull all of this off.
So about 6 months then you guys will have it figured out?
Right. I mean, I think what we're realizing is that these things have to be planned and meticulously connected. It all has to be built with connection in mind. It's not necessarily this afterthought, and then all of a sudden you just turn on all these APIs. That's not been what we've experienced as a winning strategy as we've been supporting all of these connections. And so we're doing it piece by piece, sort of methodically, all along the way, with working groups where we've got site people at the table, sponsors at the table, CROs at the table, patients at the table. That's really important to get that feedback. And I think as a company, one of our values is speed, which, man, what a change that was for me coming out of academics and then coming to a value. Like, we have 4 core values. One of them is speed. I'm like, wow, okay, this is going to be a shift. But again, speed can't come in a way that then compromises the way that these processes really have to work very, very well for everyone, And that is hard.
Yeah, I do not envy trying to put all that together.
Yeah. 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 It's fun. I mean, it is like solving a very complicated puzzle, but it's been really fun. And now it's like you're bringing everybody together to solve the puzzle. And I've really enjoyed that about being at Veeva.
Yeah, well, and I think everybody wants that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's invested in, how we can all better work together.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if nothing else, there's some enthusiasm,
Yes.
when it comes to that. So
I could not agree with that more.
We can all hopefully look forward to something better,
Mm-hmm.
on the horizon. So no, I love it. I want to shift gears a little bit as we get down towards the end of our time here, but something I always like to sneak in. I'm always curious to hear about, tools, resources, things like that people use in their sort of day-to-day lives. It doesn't have to be clinical research related necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but what's something that kind of helps you be the best you can be in your everyday life?
Such an interesting question. So I don't know if you've had someone give you this answer yet already, but Trello is one of my favorite tools. I couldn't do my life without that tool. I feel like it just allows me, especially now that work has become so intertwined with our day-to-day lives. We're working from home, a lot of us now, and things don't stop necessarily around the clock. I need to be able to know what my priorities are right there when I'm in the grocery store with my kids. Oh man, I got to check this, or it's the weekend and I'm realizing something that I need to get to and I want to prioritize. I use Trello a lot. And then we've even expanded where my husband and I use it. I use it with our nanny. Like we use it for our grocery lists, track recipes, all of that. It's just so much easier. And then I'll say, as far as a tool that I just think this is helpful to share, I'll say I don't actually use it today, but I used it a ton when I was actually doing site operations. It's a tool called Harvest, and it's for time tracking. It also has an app. It's super affordable, and we set it up when I was at Vanderbilt about 5 years ago, and it's still very actively used there. But it's a great way to actually track effort that coordinators spend on their studies and to then manage that against whatever you projected in your budget. And you can do it by categories. So I'll give you an example. I could sit at my desk when I was at Vanderbilt and see how much time we were spending for regulatory, how much time we were spending with monitors, how much time we were spending seeing patients, doing data entry. And I could understand how I needed to staff that, how I needed to allocate my resources. I could look at a person and see the people that were overwhelmed and they were logging too much time week to week, and the people that had time because of the ebb and flow of studies and patients. And then I could look at an individual study and see that we were going to go way over budget. And I had an incredible amount of data to go back to the sponsor and renegotiate. Because I feel like that is such a mystery in this whole process for us. Where is everyone spending their time? I can figure out other, costs I'm getting invoices to for vendors that you guys are using. I know how much my labs and my procedures and that stuff is costing me and my IRB fees, but the effort is what becomes so challenging. And so that was a really, really great and affordable tool that I highly recommend for sites that really want to get a handle on where all the effort's being spent and then try to figure out how to allocate resources that they have, as just resourcing. Figuring that out is just really, really challenging when you're working with a lot of studies and a lot of different coordinators and staff.
Yeah, there's certainly not a lot of consistency in, how much effort gets put towards studies. Some studies are easy to enroll. They take up a lot of time. Some aren't, and they may still take up a lot of time or they may not, but it gets challenging, especially as, site models evolve where you've got even the way we operate, there's coordinators working on the other side of town. I got no idea what they're doing.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not quite the right way to say it. I know what they're doing, but I don't know, how much time are you really spending on this study versus the other? So yeah, that's always challenging is sort of an ebb and flow. So
yes.
No, I love that.
Yes.
You said that's called Harvest?
Harvest. Yes, it is incredible.
And I do like Trello. I've used Trello. I really like Kanban board,
Yes.
style thing. So I'm a big fan of Trello as well. So no, those are awesome. I don't know that anyone's brought either of those up before, so I appreciate
You're
that.
staying in the technology theme, I guess. I can't get away from
it. Well, all right. Well, where can people find you online?
I would say really just LinkedIn. Outside of working hours, I'm like head down mothering. I know you've got kids around my age too. And so I'm usually just on LinkedIn. I really don't have any of don't judge me too much, but I really don't have anything else set up as far as social media or anything like that goes. And if they're interested in anything we're doing for sites at Veeva, they can go to sites.veeva.com.
Very cool. Make sure that post that up on our show notes. And anything else before we sign off here?
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity. And I think your voice hasn't been the only one, but certainly has been one of the voices that I think a lot of sites are appreciating right now, as far as just getting the site perspective out there, the site needs out there, drawing attention to things that just need change, things that don't just have to continue to be the same because we've always done it that way. And I think that kind of just supports the whole conversation we've had of our mindsets doing site work really has to change. And we really have to put pressure on technology companies, sponsors to be able to operate better. And you're really leading that charge in your spare time. And I appreciate that. It's been really fun following you and looking out for when you ping Veeva or something else. We're all looking out for your posts. And I think you're doing great work and getting the right ripples effects going. So thanks for your time.
I appreciate that. I'm trying not to make too many people mad at me at the same time. So it's a very fine line to
That's
walk,
a good strategy.
Well, Bree, thank you so much. I thought this was a very enlightening conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks again for having me.
As always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for show notes, episode transcripts, and our guests' contact information. Thanks again.